In the dead of night, a starving, broken dog stumbles into a dark alley, his ribs painfully visible beneath his matted fur. The world has abandoned him, and hunger claws at his every step. But then, through the silence of the cold streets, a tiny cry shatters the stillness. It's the sound of a baby left alone, vulnerable, with no one to care. For a moment, the dog hesitates, confusion clouding his weary mind. He's too weak to do anything for himself, let alone for a helpless child. But something deeper stirs within him, a sense of protection, a flicker of a bond he thought had died within him long ago. With trembling legs, he approaches, his heart pounding as he nudges the baby gently with his nose, seeking warmth and life. As the baby's cries echo into the night, the dog stays beside it, offering what little comfort he can, a broken, starving creature protecting a child who may not survive the night. What happens next will haunt you. The courage of a dog with nothing left to give, and the fragile hope of a child who still believes in the kindness of the world. Will it be enough? The night was cold and unforgiving, as if the heavens themselves had forgotten to watch over the lost souls of the world. The city, alive with its usual hustle, seemed to ignore the quiet suffering in its forgotten corners. Beneath the dim streetlights, a dog limped, its ribs visible beneath its mangy fur, eyes dull from hunger and exhaustion. Rex had once been a proud dog, a beautiful mix of shepherd and terrier, but now he was a shadow of his former self. His coat, once thick and glossy, was now matted and caked with dirt. His legs barely seemed strong enough to carry him forward, dragging across the pavement as if they had given up on holding him up. The once fiery spark of loyalty in his eyes had been dulled by days, weeks maybe, without food. The streets, once a place of adventure and companionship, now only whispered of pain. The smell of food wafted from nearby restaurant dumpsters, but it was a distant, cruel scent that only reminded him of what he no longer had. His stomach growled, but the sound seemed muffled, swallowed by the emptiness inside him. Every step was a struggle, but Rex had learned long ago that survival required more than just physical strength. It was the small, steady perseverance that had kept him alive this long. But hunger wasn't what had driven him into the alleyway that night. No, it was something far deeper, something rooted in instinct. Something he hadn't felt in so long. A faint cry echoed through the shadows, soft, desperate and fragile. The sound was unnatural amidst the city's constant hum, and it immediately caught Rex's attention. His ears perked, his body tensing. It wasn't the cry of another animal, no, it was a human cry. A baby's cry. His eyes darted around, searching for the source. The city, with its steel and concrete, hid 1,000 dark secrets, but Rex had learned to notice the quiet ones, the ones the world chose to ignore. The cry echoed again, a heartbreaking wail that sent a chill down his spine. It was so soft, so lost, and yet it reached deep into him like an unspoken plea. For a moment, Rex's own hunger seemed to fade into the background, as if the cry had stolen all his attention. With a shaky breath, Rex began to move, his thin body dragging him forward. His paws scraped against the rough pavement, and with each step, the sound of the baby's cries grew louder. The scent of the baby, still so faint and fragile, mixed with the harsh smells of the alleyway, garbage, urine, and the musty stench of neglect. The world seemed far away now, as if time itself had slowed down. Rex rounded a corner and saw the source of the noise. There, in the shadows behind a rusted dumpster, lay a small bundle wrapped in a torn blanket. For a moment the dog simply stared. His breath caught in his throat, and the world seemed to fall silent around him. The baby, its tiny hands clutching at the ragged fabric, was crying with a desperate force, the sound cutting through the night like a knife. The baby's face was streaked with tears, its body trembling from the cold, its eyes squeezed shut in fear and pain. Rex's heart tightened. He knew hunger. He knew what it felt like to be left alone, abandoned by the world. But this was something different. This was something that stirred a raw, primal feeling deep inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. It was a protective instinct, something buried beneath all the suffering he had endured, something he hadn't felt since the days when he had a family, a home, a purpose. He wanted to turn away. He wanted to leave. He wanted to keep moving, to find food, to survive, to continue the lonely march of an abandoned dog. But the baby's cry, the sharp, painful wail, echoed in his ears, pulling him back, drawing him closer. Rex took a step forward, then another. His legs wobbled beneath him, but somehow he managed to close the distance. His nose twitched, picking up the faint scent of the baby, and he leaned in, nudging the child with the tip of his snout. The baby's skin was warm, but the small body was trembling, shivering in the cold night air. Rex, despite his own suffering, pressed closer, his tired body curling around the infant as if to shield it from the harsh world outside. The baby's cries softened as if it could feel the warmth of the dog's presence. Rex let out a low, soft whine, not in pain but in confusion, in wonder at the tiny creature before him. His own body shook with hunger and exhaustion, but something deeper inside him told him to stay. His tail flicked weakly behind him, a fragile sign of reassurance. Whether for the baby or for himself, he wasn't sure. The alleyway felt like a world of its own, a quiet corner of the city where time stood still. The baby's cries had quieted to soft whimpers, and Rex, though physically spent, lay still beside it. His nose rested lightly on the baby's blanket, and his breath came shallow, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace. What was this? He had no words for it. He had no understanding of what was happening, only that he couldn't leave. The dog had known loneliness, but this was something else. Something he couldn't name, something far too powerful for his tired mind to grasp. The cry of the baby, the smell of its innocence, awakened something inside him. A forgotten memory of love, of loyalty, of protection. Rex's heart beat a little faster. His body trembled not from fear but from something else. Was it hope? Could it be hope? That strange, unfamiliar feeling that had been buried deep beneath his own suffering. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The baby lay still, and Rex stayed close, never taking his eyes off the tiny form. The cold air stung his skin, but his body remained warm where it touched the baby. The world beyond the alley seemed a distant blur, as if it no longer mattered. There was only the two of them now, the fragile life of the baby, and the broken soul of the dog who had nothing left to give but protection. Rex's mind raced. What if the baby didn't survive the night? What if it was too late? Would his presence be enough to keep it safe? He didn't have food to offer, he didn't have shelter, but he had something else. A fierce, instinctive will to protect. Even in his emaciated state, even with his ribs showing and his strength failing him, Rex knew one thing for certain. This baby would not die alone. The night stretched on, quiet and full of uncertainty. Rex stayed beside the child, the only promise he could make in that moment. That he would be there as long as he could, until someone or something came to take over where he could no longer go. The alleyway, the darkness, the loneliness of the streets, none of it mattered now. There was only the child and the dog, bound by an unspoken understanding, both of them lost and fragile in a world that had long since forgotten them. Rex closed his eyes, his breathing steadying. And for the first time in what seemed like forever, he allowed himself to believe in something. A tiny flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the world wasn't entirely lost. Not yet. Rex's nose gently brushed the baby's cheek, the warmth of the skin so unfamiliar, so foreign. It felt like life itself, fragile, fleeting, yet undeniable in its presence. The baby's crying slowed, its tiny body curling instinctively into the blanket, seeking comfort in the only warmth it could find. Rex's heart beat faster at the change, though his own body trembled in response, as if the weight of the moment was almost too much for him to bear. What was he doing here? He had no answers. He had no strength left to give. He had no food, no shelter, no knowledge of what had brought this child to this forsaken alley. But somehow that didn't matter. All Rex knew was that the baby needed him, and somehow, despite his own shattered body and empty stomach, that truth seemed to fill him with a strange sense of purpose. The baby's tiny hands gripped the edge of the blanket, clinging to the only thing it had left in this cold, unforgiving world. Rex, still trembling, lay down beside the child, curling his worn-out body around the fragile form. His fur, once soft and thick, had become stiff with dirt and neglect, but it still offered warmth. It wasn't much, but it was the only comfort Rex could provide in that moment. His body, so thin and broken, pressed gently against the baby, sharing what little heat he had left. The dog's heart ached as he lay there, listening to the soft, rhythmic breaths of the infant. His eyes grew heavy, the exhaustion of days without food and sleep threatening to pull him under. But Rex refused to close his eyes. He couldn't. The baby was still here, still so fragile, and Rex was the only protector it had. He didn't understand the full weight of responsibility that came with that, but he understood the feeling that surged inside him. An urgent need to keep the baby safe, to be there for it no matter the cost. His stomach growled again, a painful reminder of his hunger. The emptiness inside him gnawed deeper, but Rex barely acknowledged it. There were more pressing matters now, matters far greater than his own suffering. He could feel the warmth of the baby beside him, the steady rise and fall of its chest, and he allowed himself a small, silent moment of peace. It was enough. For now it was enough. As minutes stretched into hours, the world around Rex seemed to fade into the background. The noise of the city, the flicker of streetlights, the distant hum of cars passing by, all of it became a blur. The only thing that mattered was the baby. The child who had been abandoned, left to face the cold world alone, just as Rex had once been. The thought sent a shudder through his body, but he didn't flinch. He couldn't. Rex's eyes fluttered shut, the darkness threatening to overtake him. He could hear the distant sound of people laughing, of the world continuing on without a care for what lay in the alley. But none of that mattered. Not to him. Not now. A soft whimper from the baby startled him awake. Rex's eyes snapped open, his senses sharpening instantly. He could feel the baby's small form wriggling against him, its fragile body stiff with fear. Rex's tail gave a weak flick of reassurance, though it was barely more than a twitch. He didn't know what the baby was afraid of. Was it cold? Was it hunger? Or something darker, something from before? But whatever it was, Rex wasn't about to let it take the baby. Not on his watch. The dog's instincts were all he had left, and they screamed at him to protect. 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 Even if he was at his weakest, even if he was nothing but a shadow of the dog he had once been, Rex knew one thing for sure. He could still guard. He could still keep the baby safe. The thought filled him with a strange, fierce energy, pushing away the crushing weight of his own despair. The baby's whimpers quieted, its tiny fists still curled in the blanket, but the tension in its body remained. Rex nudged the child with his nose, gently coaxing it to relax. He lay closer, wrapping his worn body around it more tightly, as if willing himself to become the only barrier between this infant and the world beyond. His breath, shallow and rasping from hunger, mixed with the quiet, almost imperceptible breaths of the baby. Hours continued to crawl by. Rex didn't sleep. He couldn't. His eyes would drift shut for a few seconds, but his instincts were too sharp, too alert to allow him rest. Every time the baby stirred, Rex's heart raced, and he was there, his body leaning protectively against it, ensuring the warmth didn't fade. Even as the cold air bit through his matted fur, even as his body shook with the chill and hunger, Rex stayed. He stayed because it was the only thing he knew how to do. A noise caught his attention. It was distant at first, but it grew louder, clearer. The shuffle of feet. A voice. His ears twitched, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. His eyes shot to the mouth of the alleyway, scanning the shadows. His heart skipped a beat. Someone was coming. Someone would take the baby away. Someone would take it from him. But what could he do? He was just a dog, a dying dog, a forgotten thing with nothing to give. Nothing to stop them. His instincts screamed at him to run, to hide the baby, to find a place where no one could take it. But he couldn't leave. Not now. Not when he had come this far. The footsteps drew closer, but Rex stayed where he was. His breath was ragged, his muscles aching from the weight of his own body. Still, he pressed himself against the baby, his body trembling with the weight of his resolve. The footsteps came to a halt at the alley's entrance, and for a brief, terrifying moment, everything stood still. Rex's body was taut with tension, his eyes fixed on the figure that had appeared in the doorway. A shadow loomed. Rex could barely make out the shape of a person standing there, their figure blurry in the dim light. "Who's there?" the voice called out softly, almost as if unsure of its surroundings. Rex's ears flattened, his body stiffening, but he didn't move. The baby shifted again and he leaned closer, pressing his body harder against the fragile form. It didn't matter who was coming. It didn't matter if Rex was at the end of his rope. He was the baby's protector now, and nothing would change that. Morning came quietly, as if the world itself was still trying to come to terms with the events of the night. The first slivers of light pierced through the cracks of the alleyway, casting a faint, almost ethereal glow over the scene. Rex lay motionless beside the baby, his worn body almost blending into the cold concrete. He had not moved much since the night had fallen, unable to bring himself to leave, even as his body screamed in hunger and exhaustion. Rex stirred, his eyes flicking open slowly. His surroundings were blurry, and for a moment he felt disoriented. His head swam with dizziness, and his limbs felt like they might give way at any second. He hadn't eaten in days. His body was weak, drained of every ounce of strength. But still, despite everything, despite the hunger that gnawed at him, he lifted his head and nudged the baby once more, a soft, tentative touch of his nose to the fragile form. The baby's lips were pale. Its tiny body lay still, unmoving. Rex's heart skipped a beat. The cries, the desperate wails that had filled the air the night before, were gone now. In their place there was only an ominous silence. A sickening feeling washed over Rex, cold and suffocating. Panic clawed at his chest, threatening to overwhelm him. He needed the baby to breathe, needed it to be alive. But he had no idea how to help. The weight of helplessness was crushing. Desperate, Rex licked the baby's face with a soft, trembling swipe of his tongue, his nose brushing against the tiny, cold skin. He whimpered, a low, broken sound that seemed to echo the sorrow in his heart. What more could he do? He was too weak to carry the baby, to protect it the way he so desperately wished he could. He could barely stand, let alone offer any comfort. All he had was this fragile connection, this bond that had formed between them in the darkest of moments. His world had narrowed down to this one fragile life, the baby's continued breath his only reason to keep going. And yet, it was slipping away from him just as his own strength had. Rex felt his eyelids growing heavy, his body begging for rest, but he could not sleep, not when the baby's life was still hanging in the balance. And then, as if summoned by some unseen force, a voice pierced through the stillness of the morning. "Hey, what the hell are you doing here?" The words were sharp, cutting through the haze of Rex's exhaustion. The dog's head jerked up, his tired eyes struggling to focus on the figure that had appeared in the alleyway. A man. A stranger. His clothes were worn, his face drawn with fatigue, but there was a warmth in his eyes, a kindness that Rex instinctively recognized. The man froze when he saw the baby lying there, unmoving on the cold ground. Rex held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The man's gaze shifted to the dog, to Rex's trembling form, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. The silence between them stretched, heavy with the weight of the moment. Then, with trembling hands, the man crouched down beside the baby, his eyes wide with shock as he carefully checked for a pulse. Rex watched, his breath shallow and uneven, the quiet rhythm of the baby's breath seeming like the only thing left in the world. "Please, please, please let it be okay." The man's face contorted with a mix of relief and fear as he gently pressed 2 fingers to the baby's tiny wrist. A beat passed. Then another. Rex's heart seemed to stop as the man's face fell. But just as Rex thought it was over, the man let out a soft gasp, a sound of life. His hands trembled, but there was no mistaking it. The baby's pulse was faint but present. "Please be okay," the man whispered under his breath, his voice cracking with emotion. He looked up, his gaze meeting Rex's, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Rex felt something stir deep inside him. Something tender, something pure. "Good boy," the man said hoarsely, his voice barely a whisper, choked with gratitude. "Good boy." Rex's heart fluttered in his chest. The words, the soft praise, the relief in the man's voice, it was more than Rex had expected, more than he had dared to hope for. The baby was alive. It was going to be okay. For a moment Rex couldn't move. He simply lay there, staring up at the man, his body shaking from a mix of relief, exhaustion, and the last shred of energy that had been pulled from the depths of his broken spirit. The man, oblivious to the pain the dog was in, gently scooped the baby into his arms, cradling it as though it were the most precious thing in the world. And for a fleeting moment Rex allowed himself to believe that it was. That the baby, the fragile life he had watched over all night, was going to survive. The man stood slowly, carefully lifting the baby higher into his arms. He looked down at Rex again, his expression softening as he saw the dog's ragged form, the deep weariness in his eyes. "You saved her," the man murmured, almost as if to himself, but Rex heard it all the same. His heart gave another flutter, a rush of something indescribable, pride, relief, maybe even love. In this moment he had done something that mattered. The baby was alive because of him. He had protected her. The man took a few cautious steps back and Rex struggled to stand, his legs shaky beneath him, his vision blurry with fatigue. But he couldn't let the man leave. He couldn't just collapse and fade away. Not when there was still a chance. With every ounce of his remaining strength, Rex pushed himself to his feet, swaying unsteadily. His body screamed in protest, but he forced himself to move, following the man. His instincts were louder than his exhaustion now, and they told him to stay close to the baby, to be there for her. The man turned when he heard Rex's slow, labored steps behind him. He looked down at the dog, his gaze softening with recognition. "You're coming too, huh?" he said with a faint smile, though his voice trembled. There was a kindness in his eyes that Rex couldn't quite comprehend, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Rex's tail gave a small, exhausted wag. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The man looked around, his eyes scanning the alleyway one last time before he turned and began walking toward the street. Rex followed, his steps slow but steady. For the first time in a long time he wasn't alone anymore. He had the baby. And now, for some reason, he had the man too. And maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. Days turned into weeks and the days grew warmer. The pale light of spring began to wash away the remnants of winter, casting a gentler glow on the world. Rex's body, battered and broken as it had been, slowly began to heal. His ribs, once visible through the thin, matted fur, gradually filled out. His coat, while still rough, began to shine a little more with each passing day. The wounds, both physical and emotional, that had plagued him began to fade, replaced with a sense of safety, a sense of belonging. Michael, the man who had saved him and the baby, had done more for Rex than anyone could have imagined. After the baby Lily had been safely taken to the hospital, Michael had brought Rex to a local shelter, where the staff worked tirelessly to help the dog recover. They gave him food, medical care, and a warm place to sleep. But it was Michael's constant presence that had truly made the difference. The shelter, with all its comforts, was still a temporary place. Michael was Rex's true home. The bond between them had been immediate, forged in the desperate hours of that dark night. Michael had been lost in his own grief, the pain of losing his wife to illness a year ago still a fresh wound. He had forgotten how to care for himself in the wake of that loss, his world turned gray and hollow. He wandered aimlessly through life as if caught in a fog until he met Rex. Rex had been just as broken, just as lost. The dog had no one, no home, no family. And Michael had nothing left but pain. But in each other, they had found something, the quiet companionship of two souls who had been waiting for a chance to heal. It was as if the universe had placed them in each other's path for a reason, as if their suffering had been leading them to this moment. Michael had thought he was saving Rex, but in truth, it had been Rex who had saved him. From the very first moment they met, Rex had followed Michael everywhere. The dog became a shadow at Michael's side, at the grocery store, on walks through the park, and even to work. Rex's tail wagged in quiet delight when Michael came home each day, as if to say, "You're here. I'm here. We are together now." It was a bond that transcended words, a quiet understanding between man and dog. Michael would come home after a long day at the office, and Rex would greet him with that same eager wag of his tail, as if the dog were saying, "You made it back. Everything's okay now." Michael would lean down to scratch behind Rex's ears, a small smile breaking through his usual solemn expression. and for a moment the weight of his grief would lift just a little. But the real turning point came one evening, when Michael sat down on the couch, exhausted from a day that had felt like too much. Rex lay at his feet, his head resting on his paws. Michael was absently stroking the dog's fur when his phone rang. It was the hospital. He listened, his mind spinning as the nurse on the other end explained what had happened. Lily, the baby Rex had saved, had been released from the hospital, and now her fate had been decided. The social worker had found her a family, but something had changed in Michael. Something deep inside him stirred when he realized that the baby wasn't going anywhere. She was his daughter. He had made the decision. He wanted to raise her. She was his last connection to the wife he had lost, and now she was here in the world and he couldn't imagine letting her go. He hung up the phone with a newfound sense of clarity. It wasn't just a coincidence that he had found Lily. She had been meant for him. That evening, after a quiet moment of reflection, Michael looked at Rex, whose eyes were warm and trusting. The dog knew something had shifted, something important. Michael swallowed hard, the weight of his emotions settling into his chest. "You know, Rex," he said softly, "you saved her. You saved the last piece of my heart." Rex gave a small, contented grunt, his eyes locking with Michael's. It was as if the dog understood exactly what Michael meant. In the months that followed, the bond between them deepened. As the weeks passed, Lily grew stronger, her tiny fingers reaching out for the world. She crawled, unsteady but determined, and her laughter filled the apartment. And always Rex was there, watching over her with the same quiet vigilance he had shown the night they had first met. Lily was drawn to him. As she started to sit up and crawl around the living room, her tiny hands would reach out for the dog, and Rex would patiently lie down beside her, allowing her to tug at his fur and giggle in delight. Sometimes Michael would find them both on the floor, Rex curled around the baby, his large body serving as a gentle protector. "Good boy, Rex," Michael would whisper, watching as Lily's chubby fingers explored the dog's ears and tail. "You saved her. You saved us both." Rex's tail would thump against the floor, his eyes soft and content. The dog had known from the very first moment that Lily needed him, and now, it was clear that he was more than just her protector. He was her family. And Michael? Well, he was beginning to find himself again. The weight of his grief had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled him. It had softened, mingled with the joy of watching Lily grow, watching her smile at the dog, watching her little hands pat the dog's back in a way that made Michael's heart swell. He was not alone anymore. He had Rex. He had Lily. They had all come together at the right time. The apartment, once so silent and empty, now echoed with the sounds of life, Lily's baby giggles, Rex's soft snores, and Michael's quiet laughter. They were healing together, building a new life out of the pieces of the old one. And every night, when Michael came home from work, he found the same welcome. Rex, wagging his tail, and Lily, her tiny arms reaching out for him. It was a new beginning for them all. And in a way, it had all started with one cold, forgotten night in an alley, with a starving dog who had stumbled upon a crying baby, and a promise, unspoken but undeniable, to protect her no matter what. Months passed, and in those months, time began to weave its gentle magic, mending wounds and shaping new memories. Spring blossomed into summer, and the apartment that had once felt too big and too empty became filled with laughter, with life, and with the warmth of a family no longer fragmented but whole. Lily, now toddling around with unsteady steps, had become the heart of the home. Her giggles filled every room, her bright eyes twinkling with the innocence of a child discovering the world for the first time. Her small hands reached out for everything, her toys, Michael's hand, and most of all Rex. The bond between them, forged in the chaos of that one fateful night, had only deepened with each passing day. Rex stood proudly beside her, his eyes soft and watchful, his large frame serving as a constant source of stability for the little girl. Every time Lily took a wobbly step, Rex was there, his tail wagging in encouragement as if to say, "You've got this, little one." The dog had come a long way from the broken, starved creature who had stumbled upon the baby that night. Now Rex was healthy, his coat gleaming under the soft light that filtered through the apartment windows. He was no longer a shadow of what he had been, but a full and present member of this new family, and he knew his place. He had found his purpose: to protect, to love, and to be there for the ones who had rescued him as much as he had rescued them. Michael would often find himself gazing at Rex in quiet gratitude. It had been a year since that cold night, and the image of the starving dog lying next to the tiny fragile baby still haunted him. But now when he looked at Rex, all he saw was a loyal companion, a protector, and a friend. He would often catch himself thinking a silent thank you to the dog. Thank you for being there. Thank you for never giving up. The memory of that night, of Rex lying beside the baby in the darkness of the alley, was a part of their story. It was etched in Michael's heart, a constant reminder of the love that had been born out of the most unlikely of circumstances. It was a love that had not only saved a baby's life but had breathed new life into Michael's own. There were nights, after Lily was tucked safely into her crib, when Michael would sit on the couch, watching Rex curl up at the foot of Lily's crib. The dog's steady breathing was a comfort, a reminder that they were a family, whole, safe, and loved. Michael would often smile to himself, marveling at how far they had all come. They had survived the worst. The pain, the loneliness, the suffering, they had faced it all, and in the end it had brought them together. In that small, quiet apartment, love had been rekindled. It had taken the form of a starved dog, a vulnerable baby, and a grieving man, but it was love nonetheless. The kind of love that doesn't ask for anything in return, but gives everything it has. Every day, Michael saw that love growing in his daughter's smile, in the warmth of Rex's presence, and in the quiet moments of tenderness between them. They were healing piece by piece with each new day. Lily had become a part of Rex in a way that only a child could. She would giggle as she crawled toward him, her hands reaching out to touch his fur. Rex would nudge her gently, his big warm eyes filled with something that could only be called affection. It was the kind of love that transcended words, one that came without expectations, without condition. It was pure and simple, a bond formed out of mutual trust and respect. There were days when Michael would look at his little family and feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had found the strength to move on from the grief that had once consumed him, but it had only been possible because of Rex and Lily. They had brought him back to life in ways he never thought possible. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun filtered through the windows, Michael sat on the couch, watching Lily play with her toys and Rex laying nearby, his head resting on his paws. It was in that moment of quiet contentment that Michael understood something fundamental. The love between them was not a fleeting thing. It wasn't just something that had appeared in their lives as a miracle. It was something that had been earned. Each day had built on the last, each moment adding depth to their bond, until it had grown into something unshakable. Together they had found what they had been searching for all along. A place to call home, a sense of peace, and most of all each other. They had become more than just man, woman, and dog. They had become a family forged not by blood, but by something far stronger, a bond of love, compassion, and resilience. And as the sun set that evening, casting a soft glow over the little apartment, Michael whispered into the quiet, "We're a family, aren't we, Rex?" The dog looked up at him, his eyes full of understanding, and with a soft wag of his tail, Rex answered in his own way, Yes, they were. Forever."